Welcome to our Tuesday Trend Live, and we are excited to have Abby Locke here with us today. And Abby, you do branding work and resume work, and you recently attended the Association for Coach Training Organization conference to learn a little bit more about multicultural training. And that's what we're going to be talking about today is how do we help our colleagues and our clients share their story in a little bit different way. So thanks you for joining me today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So one of the things you said when we were kind of debriefing our learnings from the conference was that people have this kind of social identity and that it's important for us to honor that, to try to ask about that in our work. And you had some specific thoughts around questions that you might ask. So share those with us.
Sure. One of the things that I would say I got out of the conference, something that I already knew, but I think we take for granted what may be important to people when we're working with them. I'll speak from my own experience. I tend to work very strategic and very task focused. So if my job is to help you to better understand your brand or your value proposition, I'm ready to dive into the work and to pull that information out of you and help you to see a better picture of yourself. And in the process of doing that, it's a combination of I would say approaches that I use. I take into consideration the person's personality, but I think in being reminded of people's social group identities, it's important because there's a difference between communicating and interacting with someone, and then there's something that takes it to a different level when someone is able to say, oh, wow, this person is seeing it from my world or my perspective, or the person is at least trying to address it. Certainly in light of everything that's going on in our society now, we want to move fast, especially as coaches and people in the career services industry. I mean, we provide very much a personal service. We're interacting with people. We're helping them to make decisions. They're investing in themselves through us to make differences in their lives. And how do we politely skirt around what is very obvious? So one of the things that I've learned, because I don't want to take credit necessarily that I came up with the idea, I think I was reminded of those things, the importance of, as you're working with someone, whether it's a resume, whether it's through coaching or anything else, I always ask people, is there anything else that you would like for me to know? Usually when I'm starting a new, especially a coaching relationship. Is there anything else in your background that I should know? Is there anything else that you would want to share with me? It may not end up on a resume or a LinkedIn profile, but it would help me to understand you better. And what is funny is that I ask questions like, what's your favorite place maybe to go on vacation, or what's your favorite snack, or do you have a spouse? Tell me about your family life. But we never touch upon those things. So sometimes right up front asking, are there certain, what are the social group identities that you feel most connected with, that you think are important in us working together and building a relationship? And I'll just pull this out of a hat. Someone might say, well, I come from, I'm an immigrant, and this is I've been in the United States 10 years, and this is my first time doing a job search in the United States. In my culture, it's not customary, and again, I'm just making this up, it's not customary for women to be very direct in a job search. I realize in America I have to do so, but that's something that I'm working around. Or someone would say, well, thank you for asking. I actually do have a disability. It's not visibly apparent, but here are some of the things that I'm dealing with. And normally in a coaching relationship, those things might come to the surface anyway, but it may not. And why not invite, as you're creating a safe, confidential space for your clients, why not invite that into the conversation? And see where it goes. And as a coach, you can determine, you could be honest and say, well, I've never, coached someone with that particular background, or I've never had to coach someone through this experience, but, I'm comfortable working with you. Please continue to make this a place where you know that you can be open with me. So while it may be a learning process in certain aspects, I can still guide you and lead you as your coach. Um, I'll give another example, and this is more from a personal perspective. My dad, rest his soul, whenever my mom would go to the doctor's appointment, they both lived here in Washington, D.C. My mom is still here. They would take these cabs, these special taxi service for seniors. My mother had, and he would always go with her. And the majority of like the yellow cab or red taxi services were driven by other immigrants. Now, my dad would get into the taxi, and he would listen carefully to the person's accent. He would observe, and my dad was just very knowledgeable about a lot of people, and he would ask where the person was from. And often he was able to connect to the person, and he could discuss with the person as if he was from the country itself. And that just shifted the whole dynamic. People would get so excited. And it got to a point that they had built a relationship with a taxi driver that as soon as he heard the address, he would jump to come, and he wouldn't even charge them because of the experience he was having. It was like, wow, someone has taken the extra step to get to know me. I get to talk and I get to be myself with someone. He's not from where I'm from. He doesn't even speak the same language, but he's able to understand. And I just use that as an example of how you can transform what is normally a very personal relationship, just taking it to another level.
Yeah. And Kimberly just said, what a great open-ended question, to not assume things, but to invite that conversation.
Yes.
Going back to the coaching piece of asking, is there a social group identity that's important to you and our work? And letting people share if they want to, but not necessarily, just giving that door. That's a great question.
Absolutely.
And I think one of the things, and we do a lot of our work virtually, right? So when we search out the person on LinkedIn, we might not even know their background at all, maybe just what's on the resume. And I've talked to a few coaches that maybe think that's a good thing, that we aren't then biased. But what it does is it leaves out this whole part of that person's identity if we don't open the door and let them share it with us.
Absolutely. And what is interesting, when I look at my clientele, for example, the majority of people for who I am that get attracted to my services are Caucasian men and women of all races. It's just been that way pretty much from the beginning. I do have some non-Caucasian men that are obviously clients as well. But if I was to look at the large numbers, that's how it's broken up. And it's only in the past few years that, as part of my branding process, I have a specific branding program where I invite people to share things with me, starting from their childhood, starting with things they really enjoyed and how people describe them. And I did it again very much from this focus of, I'm getting to the center of who this person is. This real, their brand that's been there all the time is going to come out. And what I found over time was these fascinating stories that you learn so much about people that I would have never known had I not engaged with that. Now, I always make sure that it's a safe space. So I always tell people, if there are things that you are not comfortable sharing, or as you start going back, it gets to be uncomfortable, then understand that I'm not here to force you or to push you, but you'd be amazed as to what comes out in the process. I would still say that within that, I was still not asking those questions. So people would share very personal things with me. And I mean, that's just something about me and my personality. People in general share a lot, but I still would never get to some of those deeper things. And what I appreciated with some of the exercises that I did, as even going through that conference, is really putting yourself in that space. We know how we operate. Like, for example, I am an able-bodied person. I go into a space, I'm not automatically attuned to whether this place is properly equipped for people who are not able-bodied, because that's not my natural world. For someone who is not able-bodied, it's a different experience. Why not even encourage that conversation? Sure, I'm not going with them on interviews. I'm not doing, the networking for them, but wouldn't it be good to be able to get into that space, even if I have to do some research or I have to refer them to other resources, but to at least be able to really appreciate what it takes in that client space to be successful. And what I've realized too is that I would change some of what I would be some of the strategies that I would be advising them to do. Again, I'm very, very strategic. You tell me what the goal is, and come on, let's roll up our sleeves and get there. But because of those other factors, social group identities, I can't expect people to just jump into the same box and operate in the same way. So while we do touch upon personalities and we get into barriers and restrictions that people put on themselves, we can also put the social impact set of eyes on it if we're comfortable in going there to really have an enriching experience for the person.
Yeah, and like you said, that helps us make sure we're doing the best work that we can do, which is really where, I think as career professionals, that's our place, is to make sure we're giving them the best strategies and getting the resources that we need to help them. And we really have a hard time doing that if we don't know the whole story, or as much of the stories they want to share.
Yeah. People may not always feel comfortable, especially they're dealing with someone who's not like them, doesn't have the same background, doesn't look like them. They might be like, this might not be appropriate to even bring it up. But when you allow that space, I'm curious to see where it would go.
Yeah, I'm excited to see where that goes, and to think about different questions that I might put in my materials. In my LinkedIn form, I ask people to talk about their story and how they got to where they are and what's made them who they are. And oftentimes that will get into some of the background stories that you were talking about. They immigrated here or they had to overcome something. But it's interesting that in my career transition work, I don't think I ask some of those same questions. So I'm excited to answer them in and see where it goes.
Yes.
So we have Murray here that's sharing the good point to identify what might be important in our work and that client's success. And then Kimberly again saying that you can help someone better when you get into their situation. Yeah.
And own it and do with our own. Yeah. Because very, very powerful. Very powerful. Yeah.
Yeah. So as we look at in our career work and we think about these resources and what do we need to be able to, identify some of these things, are there any other questions that you think of or ideas that you have in terms of supporting people that may be in a different culture than us?
What is important to remember is that when we start talking about social group identities, there's so many layers, right? You have race, you have culture, you have, ethnicity, you have immigrant, you have religion, you have, the physical aspect, you have language, there's so many of them. And what I have done, again, from the conference, they had given a pretty exhaustive, pretty good list. And I think having a list and having a running list is a place to start to understand that there's so many of these groups that people would identify with. That's why I even shifted the question in terms of, which one do you feel strongly connected to and maybe why? That was a powerful exercise. Which the impact that being in any or all of these groups that it's had on you, on your career, on your outlook. What aspect of that would you like for us to discuss in our sessions, or do you want me to keep in mind as you go through this process? I think a valuable question, especially as a coach, would be, to address, where people feel like they're stuck or they're holding on to limiting beliefs to, what impact, if any, of the social identity groups, are at work in how you're seeing yourself or how you're, possibly holding yourself back. And as I'm saying the questions, you can tell I'm trying to come up with the open-ended question because it creates, again, that room for further discussion, and it allows coaches to not feel like you need to have everything figured out. I think if, as a coach, I don't care how much training we do, if we were able to figure everything out in life, I mean, gosh, we would run the world. But it's opening that space to have a conversation, and in some scenarios we might be doing more listening than giving advising, which is fine, depending on the scenario and the situation that we're helping the client to get through.
Well, and that's important what you just said. I think as coaches, career professionals, maybe sometimes we don't have coach training. We often feel like we have to have the answer. And so we might not want to go to a certain place with a client because we don't have the answer. What should they do with their resume if they have an ethnic name? And we might not talk about it because we don't have the answer. But we're then setting our client up to maybe not think about what they want to do about that, or how that's going to impact where they search, or all the different ways that they can address that barrier.
Absolutely. Because, and in scenarios like that, I always, you have to be gentle. And probably if you've dealt with the social group identities, then there are certain things that you might learn right up front that's very important to someone. So one person, you might say something about the name and say, okay, well, here's how we could maybe shorten it, or what do people most often call you? Maybe we can use that name. But if we haven't created that relationship and that safe space, someone can get very offended. Someone's name can have so much deep meaning. They can say, I'm, named after my father and my grandfather and great grandfather. My name is carried down. Like, I don't want to, to shift to anything else. And fine, but at least we've addressed it.
Yeah.
So I think it's very important.
Yeah. And we don't have to have the answer.
So we don't have to have the answer, because again, the answer might be with the client. So it's both a learning experience for us as well. So then we have the experience of saying, okay, I've dealt with a client with this particular situation. So then it positions you to be comfortable for the next one. And the most we can do is offer, if they give pushback, they give pushback, as but at least we can get comfortable addressing it. And I think especially with what's going on in our society and people saying we need to have difficult conversations, I'm certainly not suggesting that we stress our clients out, but make it a place that clients can know that they're dealing with a real person. Yes, they're hiring a professional and an expert, but they're dealing with a real person too, who is aware of what's going on.
Yeah, and our expertise doesn't have to be in what they should do, right? Our expertise is what questions to ask, what data to share, the process that they go through to make their own decision. I think sometimes we get caught up in thinking we're the expert in the decision instead of the process.
Exactly. We present it, and it's for them to make the final decisions. Absolutely.
Yeah. I was wondering, as you're talking about this, I saw somewhere on LinkedIn people saying that one of the ways we might get some experience is to volunteer to help people that we wouldn't necessarily help. So I know a lot of us in the career space might do this already, but now we might think about doing it in a different way. So instead of volunteering for our local church, could we volunteer for an immigrant services organization that helps people who are coming to the country find work? Or, some other organization that would get us in front of and behind, if you will, clients who look different than us. And as you were talking, I just got that idea because you said, if we haven't had this conversation with anyone before, it's going to be awkward the first time, but we'll get better at it.
Exactly. And I think it's an excellent idea. Recently, and I can't get into details, but recently I assisted a friend of one of my sisters who had been an immigrant, who had been here for a while, and a situation had come up. And my sister really wanted me to talk to her friend, to kind of, give her some advice. And I remember my sister sharing with me that her friend was like terrified, not that she was terrified to talk to me, but she was concerned about, well, I have a heavy accent. Is she going to understand me? Is she going to be as patient? Is she going to not think that, I'm able to articulate myself. So there's so many things often people are saying that we're not aware of, that putting ourselves in different spaces, if nothing else, gets us a broader perspective and a broader understanding of what are some of the challenges that people consistently face. So the next time you're dealing with someone maybe who is an immigrant, who has a heavy accent, and is concerned about that, then you don't feel as weird saying anything. Obviously, the idea is not to tell them to get rid of their accent, but for them to feel comfortable about that. Because I've dealt with several immigrants, and so many times they've been like, well, I have an accent, so I don't feel comfortable calling, or I don't feel comfortable talking. I prefer to just email, and then helping them to navigate that process. So absolutely, getting in front of and getting familiar with different challenges as they come up. Absolutely.
Yeah, and that also helps us explore, as we're open and thinking about it and processing, that we explore our own biases too. Because if we don't have knowledge of a group, we probably do have some kind of bias to be aware of as we start engaging with them.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's kind of like some people, you run into someone who English is not their first language, and we start speaking louder, and they don't have a hearing problem. They just need a little more time to process the language, It's like, why are you speaking louder?
Yes, yeah. And as you were talking about, people with physical disabilities will often limit themselves. They say, oh, I can't do this or I can't do that. And as a coach, if have some of my own limiting beliefs about what they can or can't do, that's going to add to the problem. So I've always got to be thinking about, what am I bringing to this conversation? And then how can I continue to work with people so that I'm expanding my own mindset, I guess. You don't know until you don't know.
Exactly. Or you don't know until, you're in the situation. Someone might call you and they're struggling to get a sentence together, and, the person is an A student trying to get into medical school, and you've already put them in a category because you see them struggling in that one particular group. So,
yeah. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes, as we said at the very beginning, people don't share some of these things with us. So then we can't help them. But when they do share, then we have to be ready to combat what might be coming up in our own head to make sure that we're helping them in the best way that we can.
Absolutely. And it's a learning process. And I think what I had shared in the debrief, the changes are, it's about a heart change, right? And a constant self-awareness and self-assessment for everyone. This is not just one group against another group. It's everyone. Because while I might pride myself on saying, oh, I don't evaluate people or judge people on one area, when you start looking at all those different groups, then, can you really be honest that you haven't, passed judgment on someone because maybe they couldn't communicate with you effectively because of a language barrier, or, you might have been impatient with someone who's not as physically able, or someone who's a little more hesitant and not as bold or confident. There's so many things.
Yeah. The research on weight bias always kind of like 80% of people are biased against people who are overweight. Even people who are overweight are biased against other people that are overweight.
Yeah, which is incredible. And that's real. I currently have someone that I mentor. And again, it's interesting that we're talking about this. I've been encouraging her to do networking and, get ourselves out there and to meet people. And, because of weight issues, sometimes that's a challenge for her. And I have to be sensitive to that. Because again, I can put on my strategic coach hat and like, all right, let's go make this happen. We still have to meet people where they are.
Yeah. And move through whatever challenges and mindset that she has around that, and then acknowledge that we very likely have our own mindset challenges around that we've got to be aware of. And like I said, that one just always floors me because the number is so high, and because people in the group just also
discriminate. Yeah, gosh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So Murray is saying that exploring our social identities and how they impact us is helpful. And then Kimberly also shared the volunteering in other groups. And that was not my idea. That came off someone else on LinkedIn. And I thought,
yeah, but it makes sense. It makes sense, right? It makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, getting out of our worldview a little bit. So
Mhm.
I know that we're going to be talking about this more. We've got some more conversations planned.
Mhm.
Thank you for sharing, Abby. And if you have any last thoughts you would share with our career services folks as they're doing their work.
Um, I would say that we are definitely in an interesting time of change on all levels, in our culture, in our world, in our country, in our society. And I think we have more things that keep coming to the surface. 2020 is certainly going to be a year that everybody is going to remember. And we have to consciously make an effort to find ways to connect and to do better across the board. I keep thinking, there's the race issues and then there's human issues, right? How do we do better with each other as humans, and especially us as coaches, right? We're the people that across the board, folks reach out to us, male, female, American, non-American, whatever group they're in, they reach out to us for that support and guidance. So we have to be willing first to, in a lot of ways, set the standard of what inclusion can look like, what diversity looks like, what making an effort to incorporate into cultural competencies into our work, having brave conversations, you know, being brave with our own clients and allowing conversations to continue so that we collectively learn. I'll share with you another story, another experience I had. I was on a contract with one of the federal agencies here in DC, and I was their coach for the longest time. And I remember a woman came to meet with me, and I had been there probably for 2 years at that point before she came. And I said, well, I've been here. I says, how come you didn't reach out and try to help? And this is what she said. She literally said, well, I didn't reach out because I thought that you were a Caucasian woman.
Mm.
Because again, she felt that unless it was someone that looked like her, like somehow she wouldn't be heard, somehow she wouldn't be able to connect. And of course, I was able to coach her through that process to say, okay, so essentially what you did is hold yourself up for a period of time because you weren't willing to necessarily have that conversation. And that wasn't in any way to put her down, but it gives an example of how there's work to be done in terms of trust on both sides, that just because I look like her, I may be able to relate to certain experiences that she's having in society, but does it mean that I'm the best coach? Maybe, maybe not. And it's the same with us as coaches. We might experience someone and say, well, I don't think I could help them. I've never been an immigrant, or I've never worked with, I don't know, the Latino community. I don't think they're going to trust me. I don't think that I'll be able to help them. And we don't know until we try.
Yeah. And putting ourselves out there, getting into some new situations, and maybe even just asking questions of our clients that we're used to, but we aren't used to opening the door to that conversation. So Thank you for sharing that with us.
Absolutely. And I would also add, in terms of associations and different groups, there's plenty of professional groups and affinity groups. Even at your universities usually have different student associations. Pick one that you would not likely would have picked on your own, and have those conversations. Put yourself out there. Have those services. Offer it up to them.
Yeah, and that's a great way for us to give back in this season.
Exactly.
Of giving back. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, thank you. And I love this conversation. It will be recorded so we can share it with folks, and they're going to get so much from listening to it. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I hope what I was able to share was at least insightful and, food for thought as we continue along this path.
Definitely. So thank you, Kimberly, and thank you, Murray, for participating. And we'll see everyone next week.
All righty. Thank you again, Marie.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, bye.